Hey, I want to talk about what it means to live freely, or another way to look at it as authenticity. I've already made a post on authenticity or a video, and you can check that out in my library. But it's a topic that I think it's worth expanding on. So I want to give real life examples using my own life because lived experience is relatable to somebody. And the reason this is on my mind is because I'm a very big proponent of living freely, aka authentically. And I don't think a one off video is the answer or solution that makes it completely accessible to everybody. So I think it's important to continue to expand on the topic and go into different layers. So I've been thinking about it a lot in my own life. And one example I have is as a business owner. And while this may not relate to you specifically, I do encourage you to listen because there's nuance within this example I'm going to share that I think you can find relation to, um, even if you aren't a business owner. So I've been a business owner for over 20 years, and businesses change over time, particularly in how you market your business. So for example, like 20 years ago when I started my business over 20 years ago, really only Facebook existed and blogs became really popular and sought out. But there was still a lot of paying for advertising through ads and such. And it wasn't until maybe, I think like 12 years or so ago, is at least when I got on Instagram and Twitter became a thing, YouTube really came into play. Now, they might have existed before that, but they were fairly new and certainly not frequented. I know that. I'm an OG to social media, being a 48-year-old woman. um, and businesses nowadays, over 20 years later, basically run through social media. And it's not just which platform, that's a part of it, but it's the newest forms of it, which are about influencing. So whether you're a business owner or not, you're going to be affected by the way social media is run. And algorithms are a big thing that I'm not going to get into that in this video. But being influencing means you're an influencer. And with being an influencer comes the idea of having an aesthetic. And it's an interesting push-pull experience for me as a business owner to try to be relevant in the newest landscape of running a business through social media. So how this relates to being real or authentic is that I cannot tell you how many times I read up on, how you're supposed to use social media and how my Instagram page, for example, is supposed to look. And it's all about aesthetic, meaning all the same brand colors, all the posts look the same, so that when you visit a page, there's a vibe based on someone who maybe only makes slide carousel Instagram posts, or they only make videos with their face in it. The colors are always the same, so on and so forth. So for example, if you were to visit Intuitive Encounters Instagram page, if I had the aesthetic, if I had this influencer vibe aesthetic, you'd go, oh, that's Intuitive Encounters. And it would make it memorable in that way. There would be some level of like understanding, knowing, comforting, and connection with that. And I absolutely see the value of that and appreciate pages that are like that. But that's not authentic to me. That wouldn't be me living freely because I am a whole ass vibe with or without Instagram or YouTube or anything else. And I am not an aesthetic. I am not just certain brand colors, which I do have and use. They're on my website and in emails. I do believe in consistency to some degree so that it helps people recognize you. It also helps people's nervous systems. It's a calming effect to go to a place and have the same experience. So there is value in an aesthetic, but I'm a very multifaceted and layered being, and I can't be stuck to one color scheme or one specific way of doing things like only videos or only slides. I don't like to get bored in my creation. And I'm not talking about being a content creator. I'm saying that I am a creator of my business. I'm inherently a creator and a creative person. And what I am presenting to the world is my magic. It's my medicine that I'm sharing. And I need to keep myself free and open to express it in all the ways I want to. So you're going to see lots of videos, slides. I'm going to try on all the things. It's going to be a hodgepodge because that's who I am, to try on all the things. I simply can't be stuck on only one way and one pattern, one aesthetic. Another thing you'll see in some of my content is errors. I do tend to make spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes. And honestly, I don't particularly care, if we're being honest. I do try to have things be correct, because why would I not? And there's, you know, things on our phones and everything that, you know, autocorrect and stuff like that. But the reality is, if someone is really turned off because they go to my page and on the written part of the content, there is something spelled incorrectly, and or a grammar error, and that's just a really big turnoff for them, well, then that's okay, because that means we weren't aligned anyways, that my magic isn't necessarily for you. I'm not for everyone, and not everyone is for me. So I'm using this as an example of living freely to be me. And one of the things I allow myself to do freely is to make mistakes. I've actually been this way for a very long time. I'm not a perfectionist. I want to use a hodgepodge of information and content when it comes to my business, because that's a real life example of who I am. That's how I live. I love to explore different mediums and topics and interests. And I don't care if things are perfect. And I don't care if things are perfect from other people, like other businesses, other creators. So another act of living freely is to not allow comparison into your life and have it be the thief of joy, of the thief of your creativity, of your confidence. So I don't go to other people's pages, and this applies to whether you're a business owner or just a person who utilizes social media, which we all do, right? But I don't go to other people's pages and go, oh my gosh, their branding photos are just so much better. And oh, they have this better aesthetic and they've really nailed it. And I don't have a huge team. They must have a huge team. Everything's so perfect. Now, I'm not going to say I never do that. I'm not going to sit here and act like I don't ever go and have a moment of like, wow, their stuff is really good. I need to improve mine, or it's even better than mine. That wouldn't be real of me to sit here and do that, because we're all going to do that to a certain degree. However, I am very good at catching myself quickly in it and reminding myself that I don't need to be in comparison, because I am me and they are them. And people who need my medicine and are drawn to me will be drawn to me. People who need their medicine and are drawn to them will be drawn to them. And there's plenty for all. So again, this comes back to embodying your own authenticity and allowing yourself to live freely through your values, your morals. So as an individual, as a consumer of anything, information, product, healing, whatever it is, you have the agency to make a choice on what appeals to you. So you may be a person that's really into aesthetics and into proper grammar and punctuation and having everything be perfect. And that aligns with you and who you are, and that's okay too. And also, if you are on any kind of healing journey, you might find, not saying for certain it would happen, but you might recognize that some of that perfectionism is rooted in trauma and nervous system dysregulation. So looking for perfection from yourself or others is really looking for safety. Or it can be trying to meet the expectations of how you were taught and raised, trying to be a good girl, to be perfect. And when you see imperfection, it can drive you up the wall, because it's just like, how could they? Because I would never, right? Because you don't feel comfortable to live truly freely, to be you. Or maybe you do. Maybe perfectionism really is truly you. Right there, just then. That's another example of me living freely. I'm not going to go back to this video and watch every minute and edit out where I skip over a word or mistake a word. You're going to see those in my videos. I don't have time and energy and effort for that, and that's not me being real. So again, let's go back to, if you are finding judgment of other people, typically that's going to be your own inner gremlin that comes from your own inner judgment of yourself. So when you go on healing journeys to find your authenticity, to find your truth and your voice, you might actually realize you don't care about a stupid spelling mistake or a video where the woman mumbles over a word. You realize that people aren't perfect, that perfectionism is not even attainable, because perfectionism looks different for everybody anyways. So one true version of perfection doesn't actually exist. On that note of living truly and freely and authentically, one area I've always accepted is my imperfections, specifically in my crafts and stuff. I've done a lot over the years. Like, I've done fiber crafts, paper crafts, stamping, sewing, you name it. I've done it. I love to create. But there is always, and I mean always, a mistake in everything that I do. And I make giftable items, or items I gift, and I make things for myself. And I don't care if there's an imperfection in there because I'm not perfect. And if it's something I gift you and you turn out to be somebody that can't enjoy it because you've taken a look at it and studied it and looked for mistakes and found how the lines weren't perfectly parallel, or there's a misstitch, then the bigger question would be, why are you looking for imperfections? Why are you studying it to that degree? Why are you noticing that instead of being grateful that Jamie loves me enough to have created something for me? I have a little bit of a cold, so part of why I'm stumbling over words today. So really, shouldn't you be saying there's so much beauty in a gift being given to you? And if you can't receive it for the energy of what it provides for you, well, then you might be looking at the wrong aspects. And I know I'm just sort of using this like random different examples, but this is what's been coming up for me. I was really in a deep meditation this morning, and just these different examples kept coming up for me. And I said, oh, I need to get this on video because it's real. It's just me talking. It's just off the cuff. And it's just thinking about different real life examples that I know will be relatable to somebody, will be, attainable to somebody. So not only does this go for things that other people create, but if you are a creator, whether you're a writer, a singer, a dancer, a crafter, you might be asking yourself through this video right now, why do I care if there's imperfections in here? Because I myself am imperfect. So let's take it back to being real and authentic, because this isn't a conversation about perfectionism or not. It's not about being perfect or imperfect, but that definitely has a place in this subject of living freely or authentically, because perfectionism, comparison, those are absolutely thieves of feeling confident to be who you are. So another example I wanted to give that I was thinking about is where I live. So my husband and I and our 3 children, we have moved around like actual physical home dwellings many, many times to many different places. And we've had lots of reasons for doing that I'm not going to get into in this video because they're not relevant or important. But I have lived in everything from a very large, I think it was called like a McMansion, truly. It wasn't like a mini McMansion. Huge square footage, an exorbitant amount of room, the kind of home that had a kitchen upstairs, a kitchen downstairs, 2 fridges, 2 dishwashers, like all the things, and an unnecessary amount of square footage. And it was a beautiful home. We have also lived in an RV full time. We have also lived in a 200-year-old farmhouse that did not have heating or cooling upstairs. It had no dishwasher and only 1 bathroom, but had this enormous amount of land, farmland, and that was really beautiful. We've lived in apartments, we've lived in smaller homes, we've run the whole gamut. And I bring this up because when we lived in what we refer to as the big house, it was a beautiful home, don't get me wrong. And we did utilize it. Like, we enjoyed the home. We've even said, like, if we could take that home and put it in the country, we might still like the home. Now, in retrospect, I'm like, I don't even want that. But before I get to that, let me back up. When I was living in that home, I was actually the most uncomfortable in myself. I felt the least like me authentically, and the least like I could live freely. And the reason why is, for one reason, it was a neighborhood that was crammed together. I mean, I could spit on the neighbor next door out my window if I really wanted to. And, neighbors behind me and in front of me, and they're big, beautiful homes, but it was very like cookie cutter. I mean, there was some variance on them, but it was still a cookie cutter neighborhood in my opinion. But on top of that is, it had the HOA, and so everything had to look exactly a specific way, especially like your yard and stuff. And it was just an aesthetic. And it was not my aesthetic, to the point that I actually had someone come to my house, a new person in my life, but they had gotten to know me enough that when they showed up and in this neighborhood at this big house, they said to me, I literally remember opening the front door and they said to me, "This is not where I thought you would live." And I knew exactly what she meant, because it was an aesthetic that was not my aesthetic. Do I like the big fancy house? Sure. But not the neighborhood. And there was definitely a keeping up with the Joneses type of vibe living in that neighborhood. And that's not my vibe. I am not one to keep up with the Joneses. I just told you all the ways I'm imperfect, whether it's through my business or, grammar and spelling, so, this is me, this is real. And one of the reasons that I didn't like living in that neighborhood was because how I felt I was supposed to carry myself. And like, we didn't have necessarily a fancy car at the time. So it kind of felt like we were driving lesser value cars in this big fancy neighborhood with a big fancy house, and everyone else around us has the big fancy house, the big fancy cars. So definitely going into that comparison type of situation, which I was not accustomed to living that way, nor comfortable living that way, because again, I don't really care to compare, because we're all meant to live how we're going to live. So we eventually moved out of that neighborhood, and the next place we lived was the RV, actually. So we went from a 4,500 square foot home to a 1 bedroom, I can't remember how many feet it was, RV, but 1 bedroom. There's 5 of us, and our kids were not necessarily super small at the time. And we made this choice for multiple reasons. We had always kind of had a dream of living full time on the RV, but also because of the circumstances of moving out of that house, we were unsure of our next direction, like literally physically where we wanted to go. And so we just decided to kind of have a layover in the RV, and I loved it. We actually thrived as a family. So I went from 2 kitchens to 1 teeny tiny kitchen where everything is right in, grabbing within your reach. 1 closet for 5 people. It's closed. Not a big closet either, an RV size closet. And of course we put most stuff in storage because we weren't totally done with that. But to pare down to that and know how little we actually needed to leave was just amazing. It was eye-opening, and it was so freeing. At the big house, it was so big that I had to spend 2 days cleaning it every week, because I'm a very clean person. That is true to me. That is authentic to me. My house is always clean, picked up, neat, and tidy. And so in order to keep the big house like that, it required hours of work, multiple days a week. And that is not true to me. That's not my vibe. I want to spend my time with my family, creating, in nature, with friends, on my business, not cleaning. Even though I actually like cleaning, I don't like cleaning that much. So when we got to the RV, it was so easy to maintain and clean, and it was parked in nature, which is really more my vibe than a big neighborhood. And that felt good. And I kind of leaned back into myself, being who I was and freely feeling like me. Then after that was when we moved in the 200-year-old farmhouse. And my husband and I loved that. And a couple of our children loved that. One of my children, it wasn't his favorite because the Wi-Fi wasn't fast enough. And he prefers the big house. That is his vibe. That's his aesthetic. And that's, that is true to him. And that's fine. But we were on open land where, the land just meets the sky, and that's all you can see, especially here in Indiana. It's just farmland. And for, 6 months of the year, it's like green just meeting blue, the farm and the trees. I mean, it's just beautiful and glorious. But where we've ended up is actually a townhouse, and that was very unexpected. We almost didn't buy the place because it was a townhouse. And I think the reason for that was sort of this, I don't know about in other countries. I think townhomes or condos are very common, and they can be here too. Condos, apartments, townhomes, things like that. But I would say in general, living in a townhouse here is considered not as maybe upper crust, upper brow as a standalone home. And maybe that's a judgment I've perceived along the way, and that's not for other people. I'm not entirely sure on that. But it did feel sort of like especially coming from the big house, even though we lived on the RV, that was such a short-term thing. And the farmhouse was too, because we were just really in flux about where we wanted to go and be at that time, and what direction we were going. But this home is perfect. It's everything we wanted. We sat down with our 3 children, and we gave everybody, we said, name 1 priority you want for a home. Because now we've lived in so many different kinds. And those 3 I just listed aren't even all the homes we've lived in. For whatever reason, we've moved around a lot. And so we asked our children, name 1 priority out of a home. And we took that list, all the 5 priorities, and then I'm sure my husband and I had a few more because we're adults. We know what we need. But we found exactly that, except it was a townhome. And we almost didn't get it because of that. But then we were just like, why would we not do that? I think the biggest concern was, would we like our neighbors that we're connected to? But it gave us everything we needed. So we went for it and we loved it. And our neighbors are great. We have a great relationship with them. I have a backyard that I've always wanted. That's a little bit of land, it's a little bit of trees, a little creek. It's where I meditate, take my dog out there. So I'm not just looking at other houses, and it's not so crammed in. So yes, I do have someone actually connected to my home, but we have a wonderful relationship with them. I mean, it's just fantastic. And that is me. That is real. It's not the two kitchens. And again, this is not judgment on other people who want the bigger, who want the more. I don't care. I'm not here to speak on what you should or shouldn't want. My point in sharing these real life examples are to show you a real human being that says, I'm going to live true to me and my values. And I don't give a fuck what anyone thinks about it or the judgment they may or may not come with it. I'm not embarrassed of my home. I'm not embarrassed of any of the homes I've lived in. I haven't liked them all for me, but I certainly have not been embarrassed about them. If you have judgments of me or where I live, that's not my problem. Your opinion is not I don't need to know that. In fact, speaking of homes, I love it when people, and I've known various people do this over the years, I love it when people take homes and live in them the way they want to. So for example, the first time I came across this was a family that I was babysitting for many years ago. And this was in Seattle when I lived in Seattle at the time. And so it was all like apartment living. And it was there was two parents and two children, I believe. And they gave the children the bedrooms, and they created just a little like curtained off room for themselves in the living room. They wanted their children to have that privacy or that need met that they felt that they could have by having a bedroom. It worked for their family. I absolutely thought it was odd, but I also thought it was pretty darn cool because I was just like, wow, they're doing what fits their family in a home. I've been a big proponent of that for years. Like, I don't need a really huge, like large main bedroom. Like, I don't need that. Like, I don't sit in the bedroom all the time and stuff like that. And some people might, but I don't need that. I could see giving up a big bedroom for like maybe kids sharing a room and taking a smaller one when all I'm doing is sleeping in a room. Making certain rooms bedrooms, or couples that don't sleep together. Everybody's got an opinion on that. I don't care, whatever works for you. I think it's fantastic. I know couples who don't live together, couples who have loved each other and been together decades, and they have had their own homes. Do they spend the nights all the time? Yes, but they still have their own homes, and it's worked for them. This is what freely living is. It's not looking out your window and going, what is everybody doing out there that I need to be doing? It's not comparison, it's not perfectionism, and it's not worrying about other people's judgment. It's not living in fear of that. Living truly free is embodying what works for you. This goes for your exercise habits, your food habits. You know, one of the things that drives me sort of crazy about our world these days is, and I think it's probably always been this way, is just this either or thinking that, you know, I get really driven. I go kind of mad, particularly in the health and wellness complex, the fitness complex in particular. It's like, you know, these fad diets, eat this way, all no carbs, carnivore diet, vegan, like these extreme. Do they work for somebody? Are they valid and healthy and helpful? Absolutely, of course. But for other people, that's not going to work. I've come to learn that people who drive paid off cars, I've come to value, as someone who does this myself, people who drive clunker cars or old cars, or not the fanciest version, but they're paid off. I think that's phenomenal. I think to me, that's goals. You know, constantly being in debt to have the newer and bigger doesn't really make sense to me. But these are things I've had to grow into, I do want to say. Like when my husband and I first started off, I very much remember our dreams always being the bigger, the brighter, the flashier. You know, we always expected to have luxury vehicles, a luxury home. And oddly, when getting those things, they didn't end up fulfilling me that much. Actually, I do have a very nice car now. And I do really like it. And one of the reasons I like it is because it doesn't have to go into the shop all the time. So there's pros and cons to having older versus newer and nicer. But also there's a lot of bells and whistles on it that I don't understand. Like, what is the point of them? It's too much. I'm very simple, you know? So I'm just kind of rambling now, but I hope this was relatable in some way for you. I hope that this sparked some things for you. Like, where are you living for other people, for other people's perspective, for perceived and fear of judgment? Excuse me. for perfectionism, because those are all thieves of truly living freely. Freely living is looking around and go, how do I make this work for me? The aesthetic in your home, how you decorate, the vibe, how you utilize your rooms, that should be up to you and your family, not the grandparents, not the neighbor. And how you create your business, how you share yourself on social media, all of it. I really hope you walk away from this thinking, well, she talked about a lot of random stuff, but also it was so relatable. I hope it triggered some things in you where you can now reflect and be like, where can I make a step towards alignment of my truth today, this weekend, this week? Where can I take a step or two? Where do I know? Because the thing is your spirit's been telling you, you've been hearing it. You've probably muted it a little bit or pushed it down, but there's probably always been some kind of knowing inside of you, or maybe even a really strong nagging that you've just tried to ignore and push down because you were uncomfortable about the idea of living freely. So I want you to take this video and I want to encourage you to ask yourself, what's one step right now that I can make, maybe a simple one. Maybe you don't need to jump to the biggest. Maybe you don't need to downsize your home all of a sudden to an RV or whatever. But where is somewhere where you're not living in alignment with your values? And it can also be the other direction. Maybe your value is aesthetic. Maybe your value is the McMansion cookie cutter neighborhood. So what steps do you need to get to that place? That's okay too. So I thank you for listening to me just kind of talk off the cuff and give some examples. I was in a deep meditation this morning and this all just started coming to me, and I knew I wanted to share it. I knew there was somebody out there that needed to hear this and needed to hear it in this just authentic Jamie Roth way where I just talk and I share. And I hope it reaches into your spirit and it gives you the inspiration or the push you need to get in alignment with living freely. Because I'm going to be so for real with you, like it's much better on this side. I stay more relaxed. I enjoy life more. It's just better all around. So you can be you.